Hello and welcome to Eagle Conversation. This is a podcast from Eagle London Agency where we delve into topics and discuss and look for solutions to some of the problems that are issues that are very close to our heart. And today we are focusing on migration. Now, I'm sure you've heard in the news, as we approach election time, you've heard all the political parties emphasizing about migration. But I think one of the issues that they miss out is they look at migration as if it's a problem without looking at the people that are involved in migration. And this is why we at Eagle London Agency, we've put together this podcast to discuss a documentary that we've actually working on. And the reason why we're working on this documentary is also to share the untold story of migrants, so people can actually see the perspective, the emotions, the pain, the trauma, and the reasons why people actually migrate. And to join me here is a special members of the team from Eagle London Agency. And we specifically brought these team together because of their unique experience and their unique positioning when it comes to migration. And I will not say much, but we'll leave them to share that story. But I'd like to introduce Calvin Thomas Agodi,
Thank you.
who I would call a second generation migrant, if there's anything like that. Calvin is our project coordinator here at the agency. And then I've also got Tai Roseman, who I would say first generation migrant, but they will share their stories
out as I go.
as we go. So welcome guys to this conversation, and I'm so excited always to have members of the team buying into the vision of the agency and willing to put themselves out to share their stories as a way of us educating not only our community but the general public when it comes to topics and conversation that is important to us. So I'll just maybe start off by getting either of you, maybe Calvin, just tell us, what do you understand when we talk about second generation migrants?
Yeah, thank you so much. I think it's a really interesting concept because I've always kind of found myself questioning where I am from. You know, when you have discussions with maybe people who are not just British born, but white, Caucasian, male, females, your age, you would often get the question, where are you really from? When you have those discussions. And sometimes that makes you a bit conflicted. You feel that you're from where your parents are from because you're raised with certain traditions that your parents, brought from their countries. But then you're also trying to find your place in a different country. And so sometimes there's that conflict of where do I belong, who am I, and stuff like that. But I think the more you kind of accept both, you kind of get to enjoy the best of both cultures. So I'll say being a second generation immigrant is quite interesting, but it's rewarding at the same time. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, Tai, what would you also sum up as a first generation? Because I'm just trying for us to set
the tone
right, so people understand where we're coming from here.
I think being a first generation migrant is very different in the sense that you're kind of charting your own path, and thousands of people migrate across the globe and everything, but there's no set way to do it. So you're experiencing things for the first time, and sometimes people don't have that answer to give you, like, how do I get through this, or what to do, because you just have to kind of figure it out. So for me, it's kind of like there is no home in a sense, because who you were, like your upbringing, etc., is tied to one place, but then you're then kind of forming or adapting to living in another place where you would forever feel different, or not native or part of. But then as you progress, as you grow, then you kind of, your cultural bonds to your previous country or whatever they become weaker. So then you're kind of stuck in this kind of middle ground where you're not fully on one side or the other, but you're a mixture of both. So it's an interesting experience. It is nice in the sense that you get to combine two different cultures and say that you're kind of like a citizen of the globe. But it is, at times it could be a bit confusing. So I think it's very necessary for us to have these conversations, because it just sheds a light on some of these struggles that not many of us talk about.
Now, this is really interesting because over the past probably years, or over the past couple of years, there's been a focus on the word migration and the perception that's being put out on to the general public about migration is the boats, you know, terrorists and all this. And I think because of that, people are feeling a bit uncomfortable even talking about migration. And also people are even uncomfortable expressing the fact that they are first or second generation migration. So let's do a bit of a playback. What then triggered you to migrate into the United Kingdom
That's a
as
good
a first
question.
generation?
Yeah.
I think for me, it was that, you know, where I'm from, I think with Trinidad and Tobago, we have like a wonderful culture. We're happy people. You know, we're just a fun-loving bunch, but it was opportunities. So it really was. And when it comes to, I guess, the corporate space, it's very, you know, it's very closed off. You know, a lot of people think, you know, you have to become a doctor to be successful. And I did 1 year of medicine and I decided that's not the route for me. And then all of my friends, etc., they graduated from medicine and they're still looking for jobs. So in a sense, you can be the best at who you are, but then you still have to struggle. So it was the case of like, you know, I would like to take my potential elsewhere in the globe. And I think when it came to the UK, what I liked about the UK was that for me, I think the UK is kind of a gem amongst all these other countries, especially because, you know, a lot of the UK culture is mixed, and there's inputs from, you know, obviously Europe, but also the Caribbean and Africa, and I like that people claim that. I feel that maybe a lot of people in the UK don't realize or understand that the culture they're seeing, the slang, the terminology, the music, etc., is amalgamation of all these different inputs. But for me, that was why I was like, you know, there's a space for everyone here. Even though there's that whole element of, you know, not feeling like you're from there, at least you can feel like you're a customer, you're used to the space. So those were some of my motivations.
So, Calvin, on your part, I know you wouldn't have had the motivation because you didn't migrate.
Right.
But I'm just looking from your parents, you know, yes, obviously they were not being driven out of their countries.
Right.
But what would you say from your conversation with your parents as to what motivated them to want to move into the UK to start a life?
I think just like Tai said, this idea of opportunities. I think, so I have a Nigerian father who was actually born here, and around 10 years old, he then moved to Nigeria for a few years and then came back. Whereas my mom, she was actually born there and came here while still quite young. And just this thing of opportunities, you know, is just a motivation. I think they saw the UK as somewhere where they would be accepted, and also somewhere where they could like begin a family life and settle down. And, you know, they already had friends and family who were here. So it was kind of easy for them to say, okay, at least, although we're going to a new place, we would still have people that are familiar, and it wouldn't require us to completely lose ourselves in that regard. So I think as much as it was a difficult decision to move, they had a lot of a sense of security in that familiarity and community. So I would say, yeah, just like Tai, the sense of opportunity and kind of expanding your horizons and, you know, financial, you know, opportunities and so on and so forth would have motivated them, to come.
And just to actually add, using my personal experience as a first generation migrant as well, the motivation is around the experience that we witness and observe in our countries of origin. Now, my background, Ghana, being a former colony of the British, so moving into the United Kingdom felt like, in a way, being home, because the cultures were a bit similar, the values and things were a bit similar. So moving into the United Kingdom, you didn't feel like you were going into a strange territory. For example, if I was moving to Germany or somewhere, I would have probably looked at it from a different perspective. But moving into the United Kingdom was more like moving from home to another home, where there were some similarities. So I really get that from there. But I want to actually, for us now, look at the process, and I think maybe more for you, Tai, because, like I said, because of the picture that's been painted, that people pay thousands of dollars to these people who put them on rubber boats and all that just and ferry them across the sea.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about migration, people are looking at, oh gosh, these are people that are coming to take from us.
Right.
In your case, Ty, like you said, you wanted to take a career path that was probably not that popular in where you're coming from. You felt that it was more acceptable in this new environment that you're coming in. So from what I'm hearing here, you're coming in to add value to what was existing here.
Yes.
You're not coming to take from the system, but rather to give to the system. Now, what was the process? And it must have been a very expensive process. You coming in to add value to a system.
That's very true. That's very true. I think, well, just before I even start, I think the common misconception a lot of people have amongst immigrants is that, they come to take, whereas sometimes, or I would say most times, there's a price for entry. It's not a simple case of just showing up and,
That's through the right doors. Probably.
Exactly.
Well, I must say, even those coming through the boats are paying thousands of pounds to somebody, not to the government.
Yeah, but even if you're asylum seeking, it's it's on a case by case basis. Sometimes you're living in a camp or a holding settlement until like your case is reviewed. But then even at that point, you don't have access to, resources most people would have access to. So there's always some price you pay to migrate to another country. And I think with the UK, most times that tends to be education. So once it is you kind of come here to do either undergrad or masters, etc., then, you're allowed to kind of get your footing in terms of in the corporate world or in the corporate sphere, and kind of figure out which way you want to go from there, be it working with different companies, be it you creating your own company yourself. But yes, that was my case. It was coming here for university. I would be honest, my parents didn't think through all of the implications correctly. So, touching on Calvin's point, I was born here many, many years ago. And, they were like, oh, yeah, just go back and, you'll be fine. It was not as simple as that. So the plan was, to come here, do university. It was quite expensive because you had to pay the international fees compared to the state fees or the at-home fees, which again, those at-home fees are subsidized because it comes out of the student's paycheck once they start working, whereas for international students you have to pay up front. So there's this kind of, I would say for me, this kind of love-hate relationship in the sense that because I think right now the government is looking at kind of clamping down on migration. But if you look at it, the international students pay the most. And, we're kind of a huge factor in terms of boosting the economy. And in most cases, we're not allowed to be, unemployed, or we're not allowed to be, collecting benefits. We have to be contributing to taxes, etc. So again, it just goes to show how important. I mean, it's not to say that immigration is not a problem. I mean, you can't have everyone, going to one place, but there has to be conversations had with people, conversations had with real people who are migrating and experts about, what is the best way to go about this, because obviously people deserve a fighting chance. And especially in a country that, needs a well-educated workforce, I think it's right to kind of figure out, what's the best way to maintain and build that workforce. So for me, it was education, which is quite expensive. I was not doing a master's after that. My parents were very clear. They're like, you're gonna have to figure out the rest on your own, because your birthday gifts until you're 50 have been sorted for you. So that was.
It's very interesting the point you just raised about education, because I'm looking at the number of students that come in from abroad into the United Kingdom to study at all levels, and looking at the quality of resource that is produced annually out of these students. I think the United Kingdom is very fortunate to be in a place where they have all these rich resource that they can actually choose from. A lot of these countries where these students are coming from are crying for a quarter of this resource that is being supplied here. And even that, we know there is not enough resource to meet the demand when it comes to qualified and skilled people in the country. So I'm quite surprised when it comes to migration, it's being frowned upon. And like I said, I keep repeating that this picture is being painted of migration only being migrants
Yes.
coming on boats
Yeah.
or people hiding in containers coming through Cali and stuff like that. But there are a lot of people that are coming in and adding value, investing in this in the economy, and also helping our universities thrive because of obviously
course.
the revenue. But I think moving on to Calvin, I want to really get you to share your experience of having to embrace two different cultures. I mean, you touched on that, you know, where in yours, probably three cultures. Because you have, you know. So how has it been for you as a second generation having to deal with the different cultures? The culture of where you belong, which is obviously United Kingdom, the cultures of your parents.
Right. It's been really interesting, like I said. I think when I kind of think about where did I start to kind of explore my identity, because this kind of is a subject about identity. Secondary school, that's where it became really prevalent. We had the Caribbeans versus the Africans. It was never really a serious, but just kind of like a playful thing. But at the same time, sometimes things were said that made you question, like, it's always interesting to hear your culture kind of being described from a different perspective. And so I never felt, before those kind of interactions, I never felt that there was anything negative about my culture. But it was interesting that those people who would make certain comments and stuff, they were just saying things that they had heard from home. And that did challenge my sense of who I was. But I would say, like I said, as you grow up, you start to appreciate, your differences and see the strengths of your culture. And I would say that there was a big conflict sometimes with how I was raised at home, where respect in the African culture is a huge thing. As you can imagine, even in the Caribbean culture. And it's interesting because, that idea of respect, just as an example, is quite cultural. Whereas in the English culture, you can maybe go to your friend's house and you go to your white friend's house and you can call them by their first name. In our culture, something like that, it's not acceptable. You have to use maybe auntie or uncle, or just a term of respect. And I guess just learning to find the balance, but kind of seeing that, okay, it's a good thing that respect is seen here, and when there's times when people feel respected, they tend to open up to you more. Right. Whereas the English culture, they're a bit more friendly. So I guess it's just learning the nuances of different things. But I would say, although challenging, it's interesting. It's really interesting.
That's quite, very key in terms of the cultural values of each culture and each community playing as part of the way we behave and the way we value. And in fact, this is why at Eagle, as an agency, we value these experiences, because we believe that in order for us to appeal to diverse audiences, we need to pay attention to these nuances and bring them into the way we communicate. Now, to quickly sum up, how do we say trauma plays in all this? Because I think people don't look at the feelings that these migrants go through. If you can quickly just sum up on trauma, maybe Tai, you can share, how do you think it plays in?
I think, kind of touching on what Calvin has said, I think the trauma is in the identity, because at least from my perspective, you migrate to somewhere else, which means that, that identity you had with the previous country, it no longer exists, because when you go back there, things are going to change, and then you're in this new country, which you've never experienced before. So you're trying to build that identity, in that state. But then also, we have this, very controversial topic about migrants and migration. So then you feel like even less of a person. So there's this question about identity. So I think the trauma is linked to the identity and where you kind of reckon with.
Calvin?
Yeah, I really agree with what Tai said. And just to add on, I think also there's a trauma in not necessarily being prepared for all the challenges that would come, and not because you didn't want to prepare, but you just didn't foresee those kind of challenges coming. And I think I've seen a lot of videos on TikTok recently from people, especially from Africa, who have moved here, and they found that although the UK, has a reputation for, having opportunities and stuff, it's been a lot harder than they thought it would be. And with that being said, I guess trauma also comes from constantly hearing, the bad opinions of people that you're just coming to take and so on and so forth, when it's actually not that simple. So that's
thanks. I mean, time is not on our side. So thanks so much, Tai. Thanks, Calvin. I mean, I'm so proud of you guys opening up to share your story, and I'm sure our viewers will take some lessons from some of the stuff. Those of you that are in the migrant group, you probably better understand some of the things that you're going through now that you may not have understanding. For those of you that are not in our shoes and are watching, and probably because you want to understand better what migration is all about, I hope you've picked some pointers that will help you better understand and better engage with people that are not from the same communities as yourself. And the most important thing is, the reason why we're doing this is we're coming up with our short documentary, The Return of the Osprey, which shares deep stories and nuances of migration. And we will really want you to keep an eye out and stay tuned to that. Thank you all for watching. Catch up with you on our next episode. Bye.